Straight ahead, we'll take a close-up look at the woman alcoholic and how her problems differ from those of her male counterpart. We'll also talk to some people in Monroe, Louisiana, about how they're working to help female alcoholics in the northeast section of the state. The silent suffering of the woman alcoholic on today's edition of Folks. Hello everyone, I'm Sonya Masingale and welcome to today's edition of Folks. Today's program deals with a very serious issue that has been hidden and ignored until recently, the woman alcoholic. We traveled to Monroe, Louisiana to produce this program because there's a group of concerned citizens, some recovering alcoholics themselves, that have recognized a problem they're working to solve. There's only one public facility in the northeast corner of the state for women alcoholics, and it has a long waiting list. There are several private clinics, but the fact is an alcoholic woman with no insurance or money often has nowhere to go for treatment. The Community Alcohol Recovery Program, or CARP, is trying to change that by establishing a residential program for women alcoholics, regardless of their ability to pay. It was through their help that we were able to talk to the women in this program. Now later on, we'll talk to some CARP members and a counselor who has done some special research on alcoholism among blacks and women. Also later, we'll discuss alcoholism and some of the warning signs. But first, here are some of the courageous women we talked to in Monroe earlier this week. Some of their identities have been obscured to protect their privacy. Lisa M. looks much younger than her 48 years. A former model and beauty pageant winner, she describes her alcoholism as living in hell.
I had my first drink at about age 19, and I drank what we call sociably from 19 to 35. Never had any problem with alcohol, and this was on a regular basis. And then I got married at 35, and 6 months after I got married, the honeymoon was over, and my husband became very physically abusive and verbally abusive, but terribly physically abusive. I didn't know what an alcoholic was then, but I had married an alcoholic. And the marriage lasted for 4 years. And when it broke up, I couldn't handle it, that after waiting all those years to get married, now I was a failure. It took its toll, I guess, on me as a woman. And that's when I started drinking. 4 years later, we were divorced. And for the next 6 years, I tried to drink and cry myself to death.
Lisa finally achieved almost 3 years of sobriety until an ordinary head cold threw her back into dependency.
I had almost 3 years of sobriety, and I came down with a terrible head cold, and I drank some NyQuil. I had drinking NyQuil before. Since I quit drinking, it never bothered me, but this just shows you how the disease progresses even though you're not drinking. And I drank some NyQuil, and during the night, I drank the whole bottle. I got up the next day, and I went and got a half gallon of whiskey, and I drank that. I bought another half gallon of whiskey, and I drank that. No food on my stomach, nothing. So that was 2.5 years of sobriety, and I had my, my slip. And then I went off to treatment, and that helped me a lot. It made me a lot stronger, I think.
Accepting the fact that she had a problem was one of the most difficult steps to take.
When your brothers or your sisters or a spouse talks to you about drinking, when we're practicing, we come up with all kinds of excuses. But when your mother says to you, if you loved me, you would quit. That hurts. I know I hurt her deeply with my drinking, probably much more so than anyone else, because when I would start this binge drinking, this sweet little lady that's so blind, she couldn't hardly see to get to me, would come down to my house and she would beg me to eat. And she would beg me to stop drinking. And I wouldn't. I couldn't wait for her to leave so I could go get another drink.
When you told your family that you were going to talk to a television crew, how did they react to that?
Upset. Because if I went on TV, then it would embarrass and humiliate them. I can't believe you're going on television and telling people that you're an alcoholic. And there again, it just goes back to they do not understand the disease. You know, it would even embarrass the one that's still drinking if he knew what I was doing. They didn't want me to do it. They was upset with me for doing it.
Why did you do it?
Because if my coming over here and talking to you, if I could just reach out to those ladies out there that are hurting now, the ones that are drinking, that are alcoholic, that suffer from this terrible disease that I have suffered from, maybe it will help them to do something about theirs and change their life the way my life has been changed. You know, we all have a story to tell, and I can't tell mine without getting terribly emotional about it, because if you knew what it was like to be a practicing alcoholic and to come from up here where I came from all the way down to the bottom, it was such a pathetic way to live. It was, you know, it's like I was just a vegetable. It was just such a pathetic way to live, and I was so sick all the time. And now I have a new life. It's so much better than it was before, and I'm very grateful for it.
Susan is 23 years old. Her alcoholism cost her the custody of her son.
I went to get my son one afternoon from my mother-in-law's house, and she refused to let me have him because I had been drinking. And I had received a couple of phone calls for people trying to help me and trying to get me to go to treatment or whatever, and I wouldn't. And I just told them I was going to quit on my own. And so I was working, and I had 2 cops come and get me and take me to treatment at Woodland Hills Hospital. And I was put on a coroner's hold there for 14 days.
Terry, 33, was luckier. She kept her children, but divorced her husband. He is still a practicing alcoholic.
The oldest son is 13, and he's very much aware of the disease. Naturally, he had to live in it for so many years. He keeps telling me that he was a captive audience. He didn't have a choice. He couldn't leave the situation. And now he's real quick to show me when my thinking resorts back to the old thinking. He's real quick to say, Mom, you really need to do something, where before he could never even talk to me like that. The youngest child had never walked into my bedroom until about 3 months ago. The last part of my drinking was in my bedroom. I drank to not only escape, but to sleep. I couldn't sleep anymore without drinking or taking some kind of drug. And I did it in the bedroom for 2 reasons. First of all, so that I could sleep that night, and second of all, to keep it away from the children. And I didn't realize until after I sobered up that the children were the ones who were hurt the most from it. And it took a year's sobriety before I finally asked the youngest child why he didn't come in the bedroom to see me in the mornings or, you know, when he was up playing around. And he said, Mom, I'm afraid you've got a bottle hidden beside the bed. So he knew it, where I had tried so hard to hide from him what was going on.
Marie, single, 30, with no children, finally faced her substance abuse problem when facing the loss of her job. She says that she feels employers are more tolerant of alcoholic behavior from men.
It seems like men can stay out there longer and drug and drink and still be acceptable. I know where I work, several of the men aren't accepting their own problems, but it's obvious to the people that they work with and the people that they work for that they have a problem. When you don't show up on a Monday and you leave early on a Friday, and most of the days of the week their eyes are all red and they can't function on their job like they should, then it appears that they have a problem. But that's really not for me to say, but they do seem to put up with it a little bit longer.
All of the women we spoke to felt strongly that a double standard applied to women alcoholics versus her male counterpart.
With a woman alcoholic, people tend to look at them like, oh, it's so terrible. Look at that pitiful thing. It's just awful. There is so much more of a double standard as far as a woman alcoholic is concerned, whereas a man, if they get drunk and get wild and crazy, it's cute and funny. And it's not. A woman is so pitiful, which makes it that much harder, I think, for women. And I feel like that is the one thing that, that keeps more women from coming forward and saying, I'm an alcoholic and I need help, because of that double standard.
It defies the role of the woman, the caretaker, the hidden alcoholic. She drinks in the home. I have to agree with Trish that when the man sobers up, the community says, oh, how nice, and the wife stayed with him and stood by him. When the woman alcoholic sobers up, it's again the pat on the back to the man. Oh, isn't he nice? To put up with what he put up with. He's a hero. Really, it is the double standard.
Community Alcohol Recovery Program is made up of a board of directors and volunteers. They are attempting to establish nonprofit support for alcoholics in Northeast Louisiana. We talked to an affiliated counselor and 2 board members about the unique needs of the woman alcoholic.
Statistically speaking, women are very much in the minority when it comes to getting treatment for alcoholism, or what we call today chemical dependency. Nationwide, some studies show that at any given time, 1/4 of the people in treatment are actually female. My own personal experience in a study I've done over the last year on 100 patients in treatment shows me that actually less than 20 out of 100 patients in treatment is actually women. And actually, black women are the least are receiving less treatment and less attention than any other population. Out of those 100 people in treatment, only 2 were black women.
Edith Thompson is a certified substance abuse counselor at the St. Francis Medical Center in Monroe. She is currently researching alcoholism in women and blacks.
Why is it so much more devastating for a woman to admit that she's an alcoholic?
I think probably the double standard in this country and the behavior of men and women pretty much explains that. It's expected of a man to drink because that is the macho image. It's acceptable. He is not condemned for it. He's not considered a sinner for it, because if he can get drunk on Saturday night and go to church on Sunday morning and be perfectly accepted. There's a double standard, and women are still put on a pedestal and still expected to be nice girls. There are 2 kinds of women, nice girls and bad girls. And the bad girls drink and the nice girls don't. And that is just not true in reality, because women participate in social drinking, and women have this disease called alcoholism, and they are not accepted. It's not accepted, and it is stigmatized, because women who drink and women who are alcoholics just are not accepted in society as being okay people.
It seems that the people who most need treatment are the least likely to get it.
That's exactly true. Then there's somewhat of a paradox there. People, as the class rises, are more apt to be drinkers, and but they're not more apt to be alcoholics. Some studies show that actually relief drinking, drinking to cope with stress and problems and difficulties and low self-esteem is actually more prevalent, and problem drinking is more prevalent in the underclasses. So therefore, you're going to have a greater percentage of alcoholics in the underclass, or the lower middle to lower class people incomes, and you're going to have actually less of the disease in the upper class, but the upper class is going to be able to pay for the help.
Gerry Chandler is a board member of CARP. Her involvement with female alcoholics has stressed the need for a nonprofit facility.
There is no place in this area that a woman without funds can receive treatment, and so often we see women going into hospitals and they detox them 3 to 5 days, and then there is a period of time that we cannot get them into treatment. And if these women are not given something to put in their lives to fill the void that taking alcohol out is going to, they are going back to drink. We don't live with a void in our life. And when they are at that period, they are more receptive to treatment. They're more willing to go into the treatment. And if you have to wait 4 to 6 weeks to get them in treatment, we lose them, and it's very sad. You see them ready to go, and then as the time goes, they cool off. They don't want to go.
Barbara Brooks, financial director of CARP, is spearheading the effort to establish a residential facility for women.
Is there any big difference between the way one treats a woman alcoholic versus a man?
I don't believe there's a difference in the way they're actually treated, no, because the problem basically is the same and the solution's the same. However, the women have different underlying problems that are special to women only. Women basically can name much quicker than a man when they started drinking or what crisis in their life caused it. There's a point generally in all women's lives, most women's lives, that caused the starting of that drinking. It varies from everything from the death of a spouse to divorce, the children leaving, this type of thing is common. But there's generally a crisis in there, and especially the older woman.
Why is it so much harder for women to receive treatment than men?
Well, the woman alcoholic, I believe, from my own personal experience, can hide it better even when she's in the public than the man can. A woman can have all types of other ailments, you see, that a man can't very well talk about having because of, like you mentioned a while ago, Edith mentioned the macho type thing. You know, a macho man's not depressed, and he doesn't have stomach problems and this type of nervousness and all. And a woman can, and that can go along. But she can tell her doctor about that, or doctors sometime, more than one, and be treated for these different things, everything but the real problem. And generally a woman won't tell what the problem really is or tell her doctor just how much she really drinks. We also have there too the family, as Edith was talking about, the stigma. You know, I read in a book once, the author talked about it's not acceptable to think about the hand that rocks the cradle is also a drunk.
These are some of the characteristics of the woman alcoholic. Women get drunk faster than men on the same amount of alcohol, even with body weight taken into account. The disease progresses more rapidly in women than in men. Women often drink alone, often at home, isolated and invisible. They prefer drinks with less noticeable odors, such as gin or vodka, probably to conceal their drinking. And once her drinking has become a problem, most women don't drink socially. They drink when the family is away or sleeping. Women alcoholics adversely affect the lives of 38 million children. Fetal alcohol syndrome, the result of the fetus drinking when the mother drinks, is said to be the third leading cause of mental retardation in America, and the only one we can prevent. While the rate of alcoholism is the same among black and white males, among black women there is more total abstinence and more alcoholism. 9 out of 10 wives of alcoholic men stay with their husbands. Only 1 out of 10 husbands of alcoholic women stay with their wives. Finally, women fear that exposing themselves as alcoholics will result in their children being taken away, and rightly so. Because of the stigma of her illness, many women with years of recovery are deprived of the full custody of their children. Joining me in the studio to further discuss the woman alcoholic is Debbie Duckworth, a substance abuse counselor from the Silkworth Center at Parkland Hospital here in Baton Rouge. Debbie, welcome to Folks. The subject is a very serious one. Here's a few statistics that I got from the Monroe area. Out of a 12-parish area, there's something like 365,000 people in that population. Approximately 26,000 are estimated to be chemically dependent. Of that number, about 22,000 are alcohol dependent, primarily dependent upon alcohol, and about half of those are women. And of that number, perhaps 500 will get help of some sort. Is that in the ballpark with the national figures?
Pretty much so. It's estimated that in any population, approximately 10% of the people will be chemically dependent. Some statistics say that of those who are alcoholic, at least 20% of those will be women. And unfortunately, fewer women do come into treatment.
Among most of the younger women that I talked to, they mentioned a dual dependency. Is that becoming a trend?
That's something that I've been seeing a lot at Silkworth, where someone will come in with an alcohol dependency and also a dependency on prescription painkillers, prescription antidepressants. So you're really working with both. You're detoxing the person from two kinds of dependencies, sometimes three kinds of dependencies.
Does the detoxification process differ for other types of chemical dependency?
The time frame differs. And the characteristics, the symptoms differ with each drug. Just for an example, someone who has been dependent on marijuana, the detox can really take around a 6 weeks time period. It's much slower, less dramatic than, say, what we are accustomed to seeing. Most of us, I think of alcohol withdrawals, or the shakes, the tremors, the DTs, the hallucinations. With barbiturates, it can be severe in terms of flu symptoms. With cocaine, high anxiety, just a speedy sort of condition, a lot of mood swings. So it really varies with the drug, and the time frame varies considerably.
Would you agree with the women in the piece that often it's a double standard when dealing with women who have certain dependencies?
Sure. Oh, sure. For a woman, if she is labeled chemically dependent, alcoholic, there's a lot of shame, guilt around that, because ladies don't drink, or ladies aren't alcoholics. Especially here in Louisiana, there's the image, the stereotype of the Southern belle. And kind of getting through that and helping that woman realize that, yes, she is dependent on alcohol. Getting the family just to accept that, the family to accept that mother can be alcoholic. I think we have that general double standard that it's positive for a man to be able to hold his liquor, to be a hard drinker. That's part of the macho image, as the women were saying on the film. We don't have that for women. It's immoral, it's shameful. We tend to see it less as a disease and more as kind of moral flaw in their character.
How about black women in treatment? Would those numbers jibe? Are there fewer black women who actually seek treatment that you know of?
Very few. Very few.
Is that related directly, you think, to financial ability to pay?
I think in large part it is. Insurance companies are tightening up for everyone in terms of treatment. There's a tendency now for the companies to want people to come into treatment to detox for a few days and then get out to do outpatient treatment.
Does that work?
Outpatient treatment works for somebody who's highly motivated and has an ability to control use. There are a lot of factors that have to be considered for outpatient. The financial consideration is what insurance companies tend to be looking at, and that's no prediction of whether someone can do outpatient successfully or not. I would estimate in the past 6 months that maybe we've seen 2 or 3 black women in treatment, very often not for alcohol, but for cocaine, for other drugs, and very often leaving treatment because of insurance reasons, money reasons.
Why do we have so much difficulty seeing these various dependencies, particularly alcoholism, as a disease?
Well, I think our society has explained alcoholism for years as a moral flaw, a weakness in character, a personality disorder, psychiatric explanation. Especially with women, they're often diagnosed with anxiety or depression first. It's only been, let's say, since 1956 that the American Medical Association said chemical dependency, alcoholism, is a disease. And I think a lot it's just educating the public to start understanding it is a disease. It's not just some sort of character flaw. There's so many characteristics that all alcoholics share.
Some of the warning signs of alcoholism.
The warning signs usually will start showing up in terms of personality change, sometimes aggressiveness, or the opposite, withdrawal from activities. A lot of mood changes, exhilaration, depression, irritability, unpredictable behavior, consequences showing up at work, lateness for work, around the home. Someone who maybe had always taken care of responsibilities, children, suddenly stops doing these things. A change in eating and sleeping habits, health complaints sometimes.
They're so vague.
Yes, and also behavior that most of the family will just ignore and start labeling as the person is ill. They're just in a bad mood today. Making a lot of excuses to cover up what, say, mom is doing at home. I find for women that they don't have so many of the external consequences that target alcoholism. You don't see as many DWIs, charges of assault, public nuisance, that kind of thing. But instead, those things are hidden. They're in the home. The woman is drinking alone during the daytime, concealing as much as she can from the family. And so it is harder to pick up the symptoms until they're in a more advanced stage.
Thank you, Debbie. We've been discussing the woman alcoholic today on Folks. That's it for this week's show. Be sure to join us next week for a special Easter program, The Art of the Negro Spiritual, presented by Francis Marsh Ellis. Bye-bye.